before the flood came, before judgment fell upon the earth, there was a secret, not carved in stone, not spoken aloud, a secret carried down from heaven itself, by beings who were never meant to leave it. Or so the legend says. Heavenly beings descended to the earth. They took human wives. They gave mankind knowledge no man was ever meant to hold, the forging of metal, the reading of the stars, the binding of spells. Knowledge that built civilizations, knowledge that doomed them. They were given a name, the Watchers. But open the book of Genesis and the legend is not there. Not the names, not the oath, not the roll call of forbidden arts. Only 4 verses. And then the flood. This is not merely the story of what the Watchers supposedly taught. It is the story of how 4 verses became a legend, and what that legend was truly afraid of. Chapter 1. What Genesis says. In the days when man began to multiply upon the earth, the sons of God looked upon the daughters of men and saw that they were fair. They took wives for themselves of all whom they chose, and there were Nephilim on the earth in those days, later translated as giants, men of old, men of renown. Then the Lord looked upon the earth and saw that the wickedness of man was great, and the flood was set upon the world. That is the entire account. Not a name, not a number, not an oath sworn upon a mountain, no teaching of blades, of paint, of stars. 4 verses, and then silence. The names, the oath, and the catalog of forbidden arts belong to another book, written centuries later, by a different hand. Chapter 2. The silence Genesis left behind. Who were the sons of God? What did it mean that they crossed down and took wives from among men? What happened in the space between that union and the wickedness that swallowed the earth? Genesis never says. Sons of God, daughters of men, Nephilim, wickedness, judgment. That is the account in full. A handful of verses and an enormous silence stretched between them. It was that silence a later generation could not leave alone. Within Second Temple Jewish literature, those unanswered questions were expanded into fuller traditions, traditions that would eventually give this story a cast of characters, a location, and a motive it never had in Genesis. Chapter 3. The tradition that expanded the silence. Centuries after Genesis, the traditions that became First Enoch began to take shape. Not one text written in a single moment, but a collection of writings developed and copied over generations, the Watchers material among its oldest layers. It does not simply repeat Genesis, it expands the mystery, giving the unnamed heavenly beings a story, a leadership, an oath, and teachings Genesis never mentions. In this later tradition, the unnamed heavenly beings of Genesis become the Watchers. In this account, the Watchers looked upon the daughters of men and desired them. Their leader, Semjaza, feared that once the descent began, the others might turn back and leave him to carry the guilt alone. So 200 of them bound themselves by oath upon the peak of Mount Hermon, swearing never to abandon what they had begun. They descended. They took wives. From those unions came giants, creatures the text describes as consumed by hunger and violence. This is First Enoch's account, not Genesis's, and that difference matters more than it first appears. Chapter 4. What the Watchers taught. According to this tradition, the Watchers did not only cross the boundary between heaven and earth, they opened their hands and began to teach. Azazel is credited with the forging of metal, drawing it from the earth, shaping it into blades, into shields, into armor for war. Alongside the weapons, he is said to have taught the cutting of stones, the mixing of dyes, the art of adorning the eyes. A blade is not evil in itself. It can defend a home or take a life. The same hand that forges a sword can forge a plow. Other watchers taught the cutting of roots and the binding of spells, teachings the text associates with corruption, though they could just as easily heal a wound as end one. Still others turned their teaching to the heavens, astrology, the constellations, the courses of the moon. To the ancient world, this was no idle curiosity. The heavens set the calendar, governed the harvest, and were read for the fate of kings. Weapons multiplied strength. Adornment multiplied desire. Root and herb multiplied hidden power. The stars multiplied the claim to see what no man should see. Perhaps this is where the deeper fear begins to emerge. Each gift in this telling handed someone a power that could move faster than the wisdom needed to carry it. That is an interpretation, not a line from 1st Enoch itself. But it may explain why these teachings were remembered as dangerous for so long. Chapter 5. The strangest teaching. But another teaching appears later in the tradition, and it is perhaps the strangest of them all. In a different section of 1st Enoch, a different figure altogether, Penamui, is associated with something stranger than weapons or astrology. The text credits him with teaching humanity the bitter and the sweet, secrets of wisdom, and writing with ink and paper, knowledge the account directly connects with humanity going astray. Why should writing be forbidden? A written word can preserve the truth of a covenant for 1,000 years, but it can also preserve a lie and carry it forward long after the liar has turned to dust. And notice the paradox folded into the story itself. This warning against writing survives only because someone wrote it down. Even a warning about forbidden knowledge could not resist becoming knowledge, passed from hand to hand and age to age. Chapter 6. Text and interpretation separated. Here the two sources have to be held apart, not merged into one account. Genesis says, sons of God, daughters of men, Nephilim, wickedness, flood. Nothing more. 1st Enoch says, 200 watchers, named and numbered, an oath on Mount Hermon, a curriculum of forbidden arts, a scribe entrusted with the record. 1st Enoch does not claim Genesis secretly contained these details all along. It is a later tradition, filling a silence Genesis left open, not the same thing as revealing what Genesis originally meant. That distinction is not a technicality. It is the whole difference between reading a text and reading a tradition built on top of it. Chapter 7. What the buried world confirms. Step outside the sacred page, and the buried world tells its own quiet story. Archaeologists have recovered evidence of these very practices from centuries before the Enochic tradition took its surviving literary form. Cosmetic kits for painting the eyes, tools for the forging of blades, tablets pressed with careful records of the moon and stars. The evidence is plain on one point only. Ancient people worked metal, painted their eyes, and studied the heavens closely enough to record it. The buried world can show that these crafts existed. It cannot show that heavenly beings placed them, gift by gift, into human hands. The craft is certain. The origin remains a matter of scripture and tradition, not of spade and soil. Chapter 8. Where the legend took shape. So where did this fuller story take shape? Centuries later, fragments of it turned up among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran, proof that Enochic traditions were copied and preserved within the Second Temple Jewish world, in Aramaic, long before the modern world rediscovered them. The popular claim that 1st Enoch was simply removed from the Bible is misleading. The real history is more complicated. Different Jewish and Christian communities in different regions and centuries preserved different collections of authoritative writings. and first Enoch was carried forward by some and set aside by others. Chapter 9. An Echo That Survived. The story did not end with first Enoch. In the New Testament letter of Jude, a writer speaks of angels who did not keep their proper place, bound in chains of darkness, awaiting the judgment of a great day. The same letter names Enoch directly and quotes a prophecy attributed to him. Jude does not declare the whole of first Enoch to be scripture. What it demonstrates is that Enochic tradition was known and used within the early Christian world, without requiring us to conclude every detail of first Enoch was accepted as scripture in its own right. Chapter 10. What can be established? So the pieces may finally be set apart, each in its place. Genesis gives the sons of God, the daughters of men, the Nephilim, the wickedness, and the flood, nothing more. First Enoch gives the watchers their names, their oath, their teachings, and their judgment centuries later as an expansion of Genesis's silence. The buried world confirms that metal and paint and the study of the stars were real crafts of real hands, but nothing of heaven descending to deliver them. And Jude shows that Enochic tradition was known in the early Christian world, without making the whole of first Enoch part of the Christian canon. This was never one seamless account. It is a story built in layers. A handful of sacred verses, a later tradition determined to answer their silence, the quiet testimony of the earth, and a single echo carried into a much later age. Perhaps the deeper danger was never knowledge by itself. Perhaps it was the widening distance between what humanity could suddenly do and what humanity was wise enough to carry. If that is what the ancient writers were truly warning about, then the forbidden knowledge of the Watchers was never really about metal or stars or ink. It was about what humanity might do once it finally knew how.